you don't need to not copy. If it works, just get it here and do it here. But then you realize that the theoretical copy doesn't work. So I can't import a particular technology and say it will work in India.
Would you say that in some sense, the proliferation of venture capital has had a slightly negative impact in those areas?
Anything we do out of moderation will have a negative impact. Are we now disrupting? If you did this would be very disruptive. You would at first pass be highly deflationary of the technologies that exist for what they produce.
Like a deep seek to an OpenAI, potentially.
Exactly. If you took off the top 10 million people, that per capita income falls to 600. 2,500 is like, arithmetic. If you take off the top 10 million spenders, out of 1.4 billion, this average falls. So
$600 per year.
Correct. Continue to dream and don't be miserly about dreaming. But once you've got your dream understood, the next thing is that to realize that dreams are at best actions postponed. And so follow through with do.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Bulletproof Business Podcast. If you're new to Zolvit or the podcast, Bulletproof Business Podcast is Zolvit's attempt to capture the distilled wisdom of the leaders of India's business, technology and financial worlds and present it to you in a language you understand and at the comfort of your own home. Today in the Bulletproof Business Podcast, we have an incredible leader, our first venture capitalist at the Bulletproof Business Podcast, Mr. Sudhir Rao. He needs no introduction, but I'm going to try and do one anyway. Today, he serves as the managing partner at Celesta Capital, which is a fund focusing on tech and deep tech, but he has a long and checkered history before that. Qualifying as both a chartered accountant and chartered management accountant, he co-founded the iconic Karvy Investor Services, which at its peak had more than 20 million shareholder accounts, and it actually was a precursor of the revolution we are seeing in stock market investing across India today. It actually changed the very fabric of investor services in this country. In the 2000s, Sudhir changed his focus from building Karvy to actually helping other entrepreneurs build businesses and launched his first venture fund, Indus Age Partners, which is an Indo-US venture fund, which invested in multiple sectors like semiconductors, healthcare, robotics, supply chain, education, to name a few. Today, Sudhir serves as an independent director on the boards of companies as diverse as Aditya Birla Money, Radhakrishna Foodland, and RBL Finserv. He's a passionate professor at the Kriya University, and some aspects of his professorial brilliance will come out in the podcast as well. I won't take any more of your time on the introduction, but needless to say, we have a fabulous guest here today. Sudhir, thank you so much for your time in the podcast.
Happy to be here.
So Sudhir, if I were to ask you, right, if the venture capitalists in the Indian market vanished tomorrow, what impact, if any, would it have on the pace and quality of businesses which are being built in this country?
I think pretty substantive in terms of when we use the word new economy, right? What is new? There are elements of the economy that have not changed and do not need to change either. But when you want to sort of look at tomorrow and you start thinking future, then the ways and methods and the approaches you take, you can almost necessarily think about change in the talent that is required to drive that change. And that talent, in one category, is the talent that manages capital. And you have a talent pool that is the entrepreneurs that run the business. Right? And these are necessary to work together. Right? Any fuel supply to a car for your travel is essential.
Correct.
And now, is it high octane or not? It's completely dependent on what type of car you're in and what car you want to drive and which area you're driving to for. Are you on electric? Are you on what? So, the VC ecosystem has funded early stage startup, the startup ecosystem to the extent of about $300 billion. Not small.
Yeah.
They think about that. If you said, let's strip them off, then you're basically saying there's a whole talent pool along with the capital that they represent or direct, which will say, let's disappear. So it can be pretty significant, especially for those who are innovators, those who need capital to finance effort with no output or no outcome in the early day when you do it. There's a distance between when you have effort and you have an output or an outcome.
Would you say, and again, Zolvit ourselves and many of the viewers of this podcast have benefited immensely from the VC ecosystem in this country. So this is more of a devil's advocate question in a way. But would you say that the proliferation of venture capital and venture capitalists has in some sense created a cushion for entrepreneurs, which has increased spending, inflated wages, especially in the tech world, right? And in that way, maybe reduced to some extent some of India's competitive benefits, because the cost of labor, the cost of, and as a consequence, the cost of residence, the cost of several other things which are part and parcel of daily life in cities like Bangalore, for instance, where you live. Would you say that in some sense the proliferation of venture capital has had a slightly negative impact in those areas?
Anything we do out of moderation will have a negative impact. Right? If I have unnecessary 2 extra pegs in the night, it's going to have a negative impact on me the following day.
Yeah.
I'll have a hangover. So that's one. Second, any unnecessary speed also has bad consequences. Right? So 2 things. Excess in any form is not good. Now, it's not fair to say that there is a broad stroke or a broad brush that venture capital just generates excess.
Of course.
Right? What it does do is what is likely to be a serious deficit of talent or deficit of capacity of any kind is being sort of financed. So at that point of time, the deficit looks, when it gets filled, it doesn't mean that the capacity or the competency that's expected out of this completion of the cycle does emerge. Because at the end of the day, we're doing things which may not work. Right? So if it does not work, it will all look like a seriously bad idea. But then you would have no risk in the businesses. You would not innovate. You would not choose to invent. And you may go back in time and live at a $600 per capita income in India, but which is not good for us.
Fair enough. So like I said, a lot of these questions are going to be contrarian and more of devil's advocate questions, but challenging in some sense what has become the status quo. So if there is a sacred cow sort of belief among Indian founders today, which you're observing, right? What would that be? And how is that in some sense holding founders and the ecosystem back? For example, a sacred cow belief, some might argue, would be for a startup, I must hire engineers only from a top college, right? Otherwise, those are not quality engineers, right? So what are some of those, maybe one or maybe a few sacred cow beliefs that you've seen, which have been sort of accepted as a truth without maybe a data backing?
I think one is that if I don't have capital, I can't do it, right? And I think what one must focus on is really what values or belief systems you have and contextualizing it. If I take the lens of seeking to be a global entity, right? I have an idea and I have the capability that I will build something for the world, right? Then being frugal to some extent is very important, but not being imaginative enough to actually do what is required in the field that you want to play for can go against you, and vice versa. If you start doing things which are theoretically very global and you avoid being frugal, that can go against you because you misplaced that possibility, right? So the sacred cow belief of frugality is horses for courses. And frugal is contextual. It's not an absolute.
Shouldn't miss the wood for the trees is what you're saying.
Right. And what I'm trying to say is these sacred cow beliefs that we all have, which are important, often we don't compute the relevance in a particular state. And so we can miss completely what you sought to get to.
You have in the past lamented about some of our Indian business models being more copycats of the West. Maybe a lack of fundamental innovation around product and around tech that's happening in the country. Do you still feel that's true to some extent, where Indian businesses are, especially in tech and deep tech, are more copycats, where they see something working in the West and they quickly replicate that, with of course the Indian context being brought in, but quickly replicate that for the Indian market? Or do you see that that is changing, where Indians in India, not outside, but Indians in India are actually producing game-changing and technologically disruptive businesses which have a global future?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't lament. I'm not lamenting. So just to set my position, right?
Yeah.
I don't lament on the idea that you need to copy.
Okay.
You don't need to not copy. If it works, just get it here and do it here. But then you realize that the theoretical copy doesn't work, right? Because there's context again. So I can't import a particular technology and say it will work in India. Because what's our affordability for that kind of technology? And then you very quickly realize that almost 5 billion people in the world cannot afford what the top billion can. Now, where is, and there's a new coinage that I have in my mind now, is where will the birth of affordable deep tech take place? So it's got to be inventive. It's got to be deeply innovative, which means in the marketplace that you're working in, you need to be bringing that in. You have to put a value chain thought around it, because the value chain here, the overall commercial value chains, are very different. So you cannot copy, by the way. Even though it looks like a copycat, it is not. Because basically, that's sitting in probably in a $60,000 per capita income, and we're here at a $2,500 per capita income. So doing things at 3% of the cost, you have to be ultra innovative. You have to take into cognizance all of what's going on over here. And now you can flip it. You can flip it. If you did it here, then potentially you have great value possibly in other parts of the world as well. So are we now disrupting? To your second question.
Yeah.
If you did this would be very disruptive. You would at first pass be highly deflationary of the technologies that exist, right? For what they produce.
Like a deep seek to an OpenAI, potentially.
Exactly, right. So what would you do when you didn't get the access to a particular set of technologies, or at a price point that I can actually price my end output at? And so when I look at the value chain economics, then you will start to realize the disruption is not just at one element of the technology, but in multiple elements of the assembly that takes place, and then all the way through the supply chain to the time that it reaches a marketplace where there's an affordability for the use of that technology. And I'm saying that 5 billion in the world, not just the billion of India, need the reset.
What are those billion-dollar businesses that Indians are not building today? What opportunities do you see that you're literally crying in your head saying, why are Indians not building these today?
I think there's a need for our mindset to expand, right? And I would say that some of the companies that we have backed, the entrepreneurs that I meet today, don't have the problem, right? Don't have the problem that we can be a billion-dollar player in the segments we choose. So first and foremost is mindset. If we broke that mindset that we can do things globally competitive at global scale, we can feed a billion, we can clothe a billion, we can serve a billion.
House a billion.
House a billion. If your mindset first says we can, and I would say take, for example, the way we now run our payments systems. There is no other part of the world that comes close to what we do at the price points we do it at. It's been architected here. It's been built on open platforms, and it's interoperable. It has all of the makings that you can think of. And so our digital public infrastructure that we have built is absolutely world-class, right? Carrying trades at micro values compared to anywhere else in the world. And charge out rates, so the total cost, TCO, is like super low and compelling.
And you feel that's partly because of our per capita GDP itself being $2,500. So you have to build at a price which people with a $2,500 per capita GDP can afford and therefore adapt.
And don't forget, if you took off the top 10 million people, that per capita income falls to 600. 2,500 is like, arithmetic. Or if you take off the top 10 million spenders, out of 1.4 billion, this average falls. So we have to be
$600 per year.
Correct. I just came from an industrial center which have multiple factories, 250 factories. Over there, the labor gets somewhere between 12,000 and 30,000 rupees, depending on skill, depending on what they do, what they can do, etc. But we're sitting in Chennai, and this is like 90 kilometers from here. So 12,000 rupees for a highly formalized, organized, everybody's in uniforms, state-of-the-art machinery. These are international corporations operating here, and that's the wage.
If you were to put, that's an interesting question. I'm in fact smiling as I say it because I really want to know the answer. If you were to put all of your wealth, like literally take everything that you have built over the last several decades and say, take one tech bet and one non-tech bet, right? What would that one tech bet be? Or you can say, no, I don't want to do a non-tech bet at all. I only want to do this one bet. What are those one or two bets that you're prepared to say, okay, everything that I've built, my entire family's wealth, I'll put it into one venture or one idea? What would that be? Is there any such idea, first of all? Is there any such one thing that you would stake everything on?
I've learned over time that risk should be thought about whenever you take this theoretical bet, right? You have to understand risk-adjusted returns. And so every bet one takes has risk embedded in it. And while the idea is all in, you might still want to understand risk and weight the risk, right? And take a portfolio view, and it's still a bet. Nothing actually excludes you from saying, and it's not to diversify it completely, but you could take a matrix approach to life, right? Whereas, so for example, let me take for example, I think there's terrific possibility of India becoming an alternate supplier to the world in precision products, manufactured products. Now, how would I place the bet? And if we were to supply only to global manufacturers or global product companies, I would actually like to look at Japan, Europe, and US in my frame. So 3 geographies. And then I take a 3x3 view. Precision is highly needed in aerospace and defense and space. Second bucket is deeply needed in medical technologies. And a third bucket is high precision areas like semiconductor manufacturing, those machines. Now we're making a part. A part is a part. It comes out of a 7-axis machine. You put in some metal and it comes out like this, right? You make an assembly, it comes together. So I don't need to say, where am I betting? I'm betting on this, that in this process or this capability lies my play. But my play is in a 3x3 matrix. Because if I didn't do this, it's not good enough. If I didn't do that also, not good enough. I did this also, not good enough. So if there's one bet, for example, so now I give you this
context.
Take Zolvit. If I were to put all my wealth into Zolvit,
Please.
what would it give me?
Understood.
Right? What would it give me as the possibility that the 20,000 customers you serve, what does it give me? It gives me the fact that those 20,000 customers, when served by Zolvit in full, that they all will have current financials and current accounting end of day, which is outstanding. For the small enterprise, this is hard to do because I have to do my business and yet I have to run my accounts and I have to close it. It's very difficult. But if Zolvit provides me that very simple but very important support, I get my financial accounts. I file all my taxes, I file my compliance, which is not easy. Anyone who's doing business in society, you're accountable to society, and therefore you have regulatory processes that we have to be compliant to. So I get my compliance out of the way. I'm regulated. I don't mind being regulated. However, self-regulated, I don't mind being regulated. So filed. Then I file anything to do with something not being done in time, me not completing my job, there's a legal consequence. Or my counterparty doesn't do it. There's counterparty risk in business. So understanding my risk and my legal consequences also is being looked after by Zolvit. So my entire governance, risk and compliance, if you may, Zolvit looks after. Now, what is the state of life for an SME today in India? And let's say the SMEs contribute, I understand, somewhere in the region of about 20% of the economy, right?
Yeah. And a much larger percentage of jobs.
Let's look at
Economy for a
economic
moment.
throughput.
Sure.
Yeah? And of course, a larger percentage of jobs. So if I do have a view that this country has to go from 5 trillion to the 10 trillion, how will the next 5 trillion be built? And in that context, what Zolvit does is technology-led, it is disciplined, it is diligent, and it helps to serve the underlying fabric on which businesses are built. And if governance, risk and compliance are looked after, I think that's a sound bet for me to take. When I compare, you look at listed companies. When I started 40 years ago, what was the level of compliance, regulation, etc.? This is pre-SEBI days. What's the situation post-SEBI?
Can you tell us can you talk a little bit about that? Because a lot of our audience may want to know.
So, post-SEBI coming in the early 90s, the regulator arrives, but it did not mean those of us who needed to be self-regulated were not going to be self-regulated. But we knew that if we were not going to be self-regulated, there would be an imposed discipline on us. And so what did he do for the market? That's one part. Without technology, we would, I used to go to a ring and do an outcry and do a transaction and handwrite. And then the computer arrived and the architecture arrived. How we could just sit on a table and punch in a trade. I didn't have to shout. I didn't need to have samahan or something like that. Right? No lozenges. And punch trades. And that has now become the largest trade platform in the world now in just 25 years. So the possibility of that, we didn't have institutional investors in India, literally. We had the Unit Trust of India, nothing else. From 1964 to maybe around 1994, with just one party. And then we had the possibility of mutual funds. There was no mutual fund. And then just in 25 years, it's an $800 billion. We are
Powerhouse.
It's a large, well-managed. Of course, it's got an ability to look at issues that hit us. You can purge bad behavior, so on and so forth. So if I look, what can Zolvit do? And am I taking the right bet? Am I taking a bet on an entity that has all of these components? And can we add more? Is there more method in a lot of stuff, right? So whether it's when should I borrow? Have I got my working capital limits as I need them? Does the banker understand that my requirement is for a season and I'm not getting support? Can I get financing? So what are the new things that Zolvit can do? And in that context, then it becomes a fantastic bet. Another bet could, in my mind right now, is I see very low understanding of risk of us all being digital. So as we become more digital in our lives, and everything is digital, we need to cover ourselves against what we call cyber risk. Right? Bad actors arrive and they're all over the place any case, right? In any business. And in all kinds of waves, you'll see that happen. So my sense is that understanding cybersecurity, covering it with cyber risk management practices, and therefore insuring yourself against it, right? Cyber insurance. So if I were to look at all of that, it is still underwhelming in terms of the way we all understand it and cover it and manage it. So taking back to my risk lens, which is important because all we're really interested in is risk-adjusted returns. When you're looking at wealth and returns. So it's not about just return, it's risk-adjusted. It should be thought through. You have to anticipate things going wrong and then try to sort of cover for it within the bet. Otherwise, it's a badly arranged,
badly planned bet. Yeah.
So I would say that that's another area.
So you have observed now entrepreneurs from other countries as well. Definitely US, Japan, and in Europe, but also maybe from China. What do you see is a differentiator? Where are Indian entrepreneurs maybe ahead? And where are we as a community of entrepreneurs in India and business owners and business leaders in India? What are those maybe 1, 2, or 3 mindset shifts which we need to make to become global leaders? Because this is that make or break moment, right, in India's history where we can either catapult or potentially be left behind. So A, what are those few mindset shifts that we need to make? And B, how optimistic are you that this is actually going to happen, that India is actually going to be able to catapult and become a global leader?
I would say human behavior is a very crucial part of what differentiates societies. So the collective behavior of a society, as we call it, differentiates one from another. Take the word society in Bombay City, and it's typically your apartment block.
Yeah.
It's called a society. Right? What differentiates one society from the other society in terms of cleanliness? Do you think it is because they make it affordable, or do you think it's an attitude?
Definitely an attitude.
Attitude. So that's the first step. What is the attitude? That we collectively benefit if we collectively work for hygiene.
Yeah.
That means nobody from first floor to the 30th floor spits in the corner just because nobody's looking. You don't need CCTV for that to say, oh, he spat. Right? But it comes from that collective behavior that you get a collective outcome of a beautiful, hygienic building where your children can grow up and you too can enjoy the cleanliness around you. You can put a potted plant or not. And that can make all the difference. I think India needs to think of itself as a collective at large scale. That's the first step. That we seek this society, this so-called Indian society. Now you can either be bordered or borderless, that's fine. For me, I'd rather be a borderless citizen of the world. And so, how am I thinking about humanity at large? And if I can think of the collective good and participate in the way we want to participate, but also with my fellow compatriots on that journey, then I think we have real collective outputs. And that's something you have to also then be extremely disciplined. A, self-disciplined. And B, like I mentioned earlier, we must have a mechanism for imposed discipline. But a mechanism when, if I slack, it's like putting an alarm clock. Right? I'm going to sleep, but I have a flight in the morning. I 100% do put my alarm clock. Like I can be very good that I'll get up in the morning. No. It's healthy, in my mind, to put an alarm clock, which actually is like imposed
discipline.
right? Now, whether it's an alarm clock or an alarm gets set off through any mechanism, another human being on the other side or somebody's called boss, not boss, my alarm clock's my boss. And so I think once we understand that, the third big bucket is that we can, not we can't, not we were. We shouldn't talk in the past tense
anymore,
and we shouldn't go too far into the future. There is a time, like you just said, that this is possibly a great time to work at it, and we're very fortunate that we have the demographic advantage of a lot of people between the ages of 25 and 35. This is, prime time. When I look at 25-year-old to 35-year-olds, this is incredible energy available on this planet, this portion of the planet. Other portions of the planet are aged. So you wake up in the morning, and if all of the 25 to 35, you're healthy, because at 25 to 35, it's not like me, where I have a propensity for atrophy. At 25 to 35, you don't have propensity. So that's in your favor. Health is favorable. The level of disease is low right now, relatively, because it's 25 to 35. So my sense is in the next 10 to 20 years, these 25 to 35-year-olds are going to become 45 to 55-year-olds. So before they get into the theoretical point of time saying, I now just hang up my boots, you've got 25 years. And so you've got an energy powerhouse, human energy, that can lead actually and play a lead role in reshaping the world. When I look at the world, what we built over the last 200 years, you have a $100 trillion economy, a lot of it being cost plus, not value minus. And so I spit out plastic, but not thinking about, my oceans are going to stink, my trees are going to die, we're going to be bad planetary environment. So we didn't think about external risks. We didn't think about the external economy. We didn't externalize ourselves. We were very internally driven. A lot of internal rate of return thinkers. But we should be thinking about the external rate of return in which we participate. Otherwise, all this comes to naught. Like many of our cities globally are suffering through floods and no
choking
water management. No, we're not worried at all. We're so that's the second bucket, I think. If we can, levitate a bit and look at the world from 30,000 feet, I think we have a lot to participate in. Lots.
So I'm going to take a few minutes to explain my question, but everything you just said, and if you take off the top 10 million spenders, you only have a $600 per year kind of income bracket. And we also realize that there's also a clear problem in India of the separation between the haves and the have-nots, like in terms of quality of life, quality of housing.
And the have-yachts.
Have-lots, exactly.
Have-yachts.
Have-yachts, okay. So you see that big differentiator, right? So in a city like Bombay or even Chennai for that matter, if I were to rent a house for 7,000 rupees per month rent, I would typically not get anything that's anyone would call an ideal quality of life, right? So there is a huge delta. So and therefore, to live a decent life in India, it's getting priced out of a lot of people, the reach of a lot of people. And therefore, the question I have is, and that's on one side. On the other side, you see in places like China, a house is getting put together in 28 hours. Right? They built a 15-story building in 28 hours, including the interiors and everything, the plumbing, electricals, everything. So it came from flat ground to a 10, 15, 20-story building in 28 hours. And that time can radically disrupt the cost of construction as well, and therefore the cost to the eventual house owner. So why is that not getting the kind of attention and funding and energy that it deserves? We are clearly sitting on a lot of people who are desperate for good housing. The technology exists. The money to make the technology come alive exists. The companies to build that technology, build those houses exist. But yet those houses don't exist. And we don't see them, and we don't see people enjoying them. So where is that gap? Why are collectively, you used the word collective, collectively why are we failing to deliver a humane quality of life to so many hundreds of millions of our citizens?
So I think we've suffered quite a lot of the effort that it takes to formalize human effort. Right? And formalization is the ability to state contractually, I want to do this, and I will do it, and I have the competency to deliver it. So there are multiple pieces in this. A, competency. Who's to say what it is? B, be able to contractually say I'll do it. Not social contracts that we're used to, that I know you, you know me, we'll do it. You're my dad's son, your dad's son, da da da.
Correct.
No, it is because there's a certain level of competency required to complete something in a stated quality parameter, in time, and at a particular cost. And these are mutually exclusive. You can't tell me because my quality's got to go up, my cost will go up, and my time will also go up. You won't get the job now.
Absolutely correct, yeah.
You're going to cut on time, cut on cost, and a higher quality, right?
Correct.
So you look at construction as an area. It is same botheration that you had and concern. And so we actually invested in the sector. Yeah, because we see it as a $8 trillion economy. Not much changes have taken place, and therefore you're not getting it. So anybody who actually thought about it and got to act on it is actually benefiting from that shift. Because to your point, the customer wants it. So now if you put your mind around what the customer requires, it'll happen. You have to then arrange the forces that are required, and somebody thinks through the value chain, total value chain, and not just the point solution. So a macro problem that you address is exactly like what I think what Zolvit is doing, is at a macro level. If we have 1 million small and medium enterprises, which all they need is somebody to support them with the method. You have formalized the processes required for finance, accounts, legal, tax, governance, risk, compliance, secretarial, the whole bundle. And you're doing it for a price point that they can afford. You see, the more important point is, I can do all this, but I'm going to charge you 1 lakh a month. You'll say, my business is not that big if I can't get this done at 5,000 rupees a month.
Yeah.
So now if I can get all of this done in 5,000 rupees a month, it leaves me with minimum 8 days of the month to focus on the business. And now if I go to business advisor as well, I could do it. So we did this in construction. We said, if we got the construction labor pools more smartly managed, with system thinking and with quality checks that they did. So, yeah, you put a brick here, but then I need to check whether it's 90 degrees or not. Because this is not 90 degrees, the next wall isn't coming up. Right? But do it at this stage, and then do it at the next stage, and then the following stage as well. And often we don't have a method to formalize our work in system thinking or in industrial thinking. And so my belief is, and today that company that we backed in the last 4 years has grown from a 50 crore business to a 1,000 crore business.
Wow.
So it's not like, you're absolutely right that the demand is there. And we're doing it in 6 cities with good old general contractors, with their labor crews, but to a specific method. So just like what Zolvit has done in the area, in construction, you can apply it, and you need to do it. Because is there a demand, my belief, for 10,000 homes to be built?
Every day.
Plots? I would say yes. And then it comes back to say, okay, let's work backwards and say, now how do you look at it today? What's the inventory cycle? So now you start, delving deeper, and absolutely to your point, any value chain at my price points. We're doing this, of course, at not the 10 million, but maybe at the 10th to the 20th million for sure. Or even in the 10th to 20th million, it's not easy to do. I'm not doing it for 1.4 billion. But even in that segment where we're doing it, it would be in its category. If you're in the top segment of society in any part of the world, then you expect a certain factor of living, right?
Correct.
And if you're able to provision it for that factor, but even so, today at that per capita
price point
capacity to pay, we're able to deliver it. And so yeah, I think every one of these areas, when you look at India's possibilities, you can slice and dice the economy into multiple parts, look at them as value chains, look at them for collectives, look at them for cohorts that we want to serve, and each of them is $1 billion business, by the way. Like I said, if you take the next 5 trillion, I have 5,000 such that are going to make it. Not 5, not the NSE 50.
Yeah.
We can have the NSE 5,000.
Absolutely. So I think one very brutally honest perspective on India is that while we are world class in some pockets, in general today we are not there yet in terms of being world class. When you compare it, not just in terms of the economic fundamentals, but even in terms of just the way India looks and feels to an Indian, forget an outsider, right? It doesn't feel world class yet. What is, and 2 questions here. One, what is holding it back? In some sense, maybe is democracy holding it back? And 2, what needs to happen? And what can the ecosystem of entrepreneurs and by extension venture capitalists do to take India from where it is to world class in the shortest possible time?
It's not simple.
Yeah.
Let's break it up.
Sure.
Because once you take a complex issue, the way to think about it is to break it up. Right? Just break it up into smaller pieces that we can bite, chew, eat, digest sustainably. And that's how, if you look at one thing at a time, you can actually work at it. Like I share with you, if you pay attention to it. So what we need is people with attention to detail. We need people who want to leave behind some stuff at the end of some period. Like, what will I leave behind in 3 years? What will I leave behind in 30 years? Right? And that is philosophical. It's important. Whatever I do today, I leave behind. So the pursuit of perfection, the pursuit of high quality, the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of your aspiration for it, right? It is okay that the current status quo is this. It's okay. Don't get overwhelmed by it. We need to do something about it. Let's say, and then you start thinking about it. So I've come from Bangalore, and if I look at the T2 airport, it is by far more than world class.
Absolutely.
Right? Done by us.
True.
I mean, the respect to a gardener is as high as a PhD in theoretical physics in that environment. That the beauty of that place is actually the landscape effort. That it is meant for flying planes which require geniuses, but the respect to somebody who thinks about landscaping and makes you feel, you walk through that place and people are taking photographs like it hasn't been seen. So, yes, is it possible? 100% it is possible. But it requires not just the gardener, all of us to accept that is the environment that is our standard, right? Not a leaky airport that we used to once be in, or not an airport that is scrounging for space, that it is disorganized. And it was not, one may say it is money, one may say, it's Bangalore. But I know what the Bangalore airport looked like.
Looked like in 2008.
Right? Not too long ago. Then we saw T1, which was at the time a standard. But we're not happy enough. And so T2 came, and T2 is at a global best.
Absolutely.
Okay? All other airports of the world want to be that now. And I can take segment by segment. And why is it not, you're asking me, why is it not all of the above? Should be so? Of course, that's my dream. But if you can inspire the 25-year-old who's going to set up a business to be compliant, to be day-to-day, to be organized, file right, file on time. That's like, one may think, hey, really? It's like just combing your hair. But yes, you can comb your hair. It's not that difficult. Maybe you need to show how. And then after that, they can do it. And give them a comb. Right? Hand over the comb. So, the key is system thinking, thinking at scale, and the opportunity is just incredibly high, right? So I've not had even one night of a lack of sleep. Basically because the opportunity has existed all my life at least. And I can't see the opportunity disappearing.
In fact, in going up.
Absolutely. And to your point, what took 40 years could be done in 4 years. Some parts of it, surely some parts of it. And I would say, more than ultra bullish about it. Every time you see that the status quo is not good, that you can be bullish about, right?
Nice. So now we are in the parting shots, right? To the audience who's watching this, what is your parting shot to an entrepreneur? Okay, let's take 3 categories of entrepreneurs. Category A, just graduated from college or just left a job looking to start. Category B has started but is finding themselves in a bit of an inertia phase, struggling to scale or wanting to scale desperately. And category C has scaled, now seeks global domination. So what is your parting shot to each of these 3 categories?
To all.
Okay, to all.
And it doesn't matter at what phase of life you're in. Continue to dream.
Okay.
And don't be miserly about dreaming. First step. So don't exercise caution on dreaming. But once you've got your dream understood, right? You've understood the dimensions of the dream. The next thing is that to realize that dreams are at best actions postponed, right? And so follow through with do.
Wow, that's going to be the title of this podcast, by the way. Don't be miserly on your dreams. So thank you so much, Sudhir sir, for all your time today. The wisdom was incredible. And we'd urge all of you to write in, ask questions. We will try to do a follow-up interview with Sudhir sir as well, given if his time is available. But we'll try to get as many of your questions handed over to him and try to do a follow-on where some of those questions get answered. But thank you so much for watching. And once again, sir, thank you. It's been a real pleasure.